Hey everyone, welcome to Silicon Alley Podcast. I'm your host, William Glass, CEO and co-founder of GetOstrich.com, and of course, host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. On today's episode, I have William Moore, and Will is the CEO and founder of Doorstep Delivery. If you're not familiar with Doorstep Delivery, it is essentially the first. It was around before Uber Eats, Grubhub, all those companies. And they recently sold the business in February of last year for $323 million. So Will talks about his experience building Doorstep Delivery, Rollins Rentals, his real estate business that he built up prior to starting Doorstep Delivery, and the process of his exit, and then of course his new business that he's working on called More Momentum. Now, More Momentum is focused on living your best life. So Will talks about 5 cores and how over the course of his life he has gotten really into personal development and self-help and wanted to find a way to distill all his knowledge as well as bring all of the different topics into one central location. And so that's what he's building with More Momentum, a book, an app, and a whole movement around living your best life and being the best self that you can be. So this episode is really deep. We talk a lot about his story and experience, and we run out of time before we jump into some of the personal finance and questions that you're used to getting at the end. So Will and I are going to have to reconnect on that front. But we actually both are Rollins College grads and met at Rollins College. Will talks a little bit about that in the podcast, so I won't get too in depth. But super excited to share today's episode. I know you're going to really love it, and you're going to love hearing from Will Moore, the CEO and founder of Doorstep Delivery, which they exited for $323 million. So enjoy today's episode. Thanks, guys. So Will, welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited to have you on and hear more about your story and just understand what it's like to have built Doorstep Delivery, Rollins Rentals, all these different businesses, and now working on More Momentum.
Thank you so much, my man, William. Very good to be speaking to my namesake. And so just quickly, William and I met at Rollins. There was a dedication ceremony for the new Kathleen Rollins building.
Kathleen W. Rollins, yeah.
And very exciting for Rollins. And I think William and I were both a little jealous that they're building this huge thing that's just going to help propel kids into the next stratosphere with their careers and all that. And we were super impressed, and we were honored to be able to be part of that and talk on a panel and do some other things. So great to be with you, my man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And so obviously we've got mutual background, having both attended Rollins College in Orlando, Florida, for those that aren't familiar. And Winter Park, sorry. Yeah, I say Orlando just
everybody
because,
knows Orlando, right?
Yeah, everybody knows Orlando.
Not Disney World. People that haven't been there, right? Do they not always say, you went to school at Disney? It's like, no.
Yeah.
That's a totally different universe. Winter Park and Disney are like 45 minutes away. It's like a completely different world.
Oh yeah. But you're right. That's the common association. So yeah.
Not to put down Disney. Disney's a great place.
It is. Yeah.
When you have kids, which I'll be going there in a few years. I don't like lines, but as my kids get a little bit older, I'll definitely be doing it. We'll get the fast pass.
There you go. Yeah, that's the key. That's the key. Use the fast pass.
So anyways, yeah, we'll get right into it. So yeah, it's been a journey. So I graduated. I'm a bit older than William. I actually graduated in '99, and the backstory is I had actually a pretty tough adolescence. So my childhood was really cool. I was actually born in Pasadena, California. I then moved to Hawaii when I was 2 years old. I lived in Honolulu till I was 7 with my white-haired older sister. She had like white hair. I had blonde hair, but hers was like white. Two hippie parents. They did divorce when we were 2, but something that they did that we just assumed was normal and we figured everybody did, which was that they actually stayed in proximity to one another. So they bought a duplex, and my dad lived upstairs, my mom lived downstairs, and we literally just split the time with both of them. And we were like, doesn't everybody do this? To us, it was totally normal. And they were able to get along enough to the point where, it wasn't, they could live in proximity, but they couldn't get along well enough to stay married. But that was a good thing because there would have been a lot of fun. So my mom, speaking of that, she had a pretty violent temper. She was an alcoholic. Everybody's got a story. My grandfather actually was a general in World War II. and the Korean War. And so that's just kind of par for the course, alcoholism. Back then, it was cocktail hour. It was at lunch, they had their cocktails, dinner, they had their cocktails, and that just ended up spanning pretty much, when he got retired, into pretty much all day, every day. And then she picked up on that. He had a temper as well. So I think she got some of that from him. And bottom line is that kind of spilled on to my sister and I. And so that was a bit tough. My dad was working a lot. He was an entrepreneur. He started a crystal business. So he kind of broke out of that hippie thing and just saying, whatever happens, happens. It's all good, peace, love, which I'm all about that. But I also think, and I got this side of me, which is like, I definitely see things from I don't want to alienate anybody, but probably more socially from a liberal perspective, but fiscally, I'm probably more conservative. And I don't even like to put myself into a box when it comes to what I am in terms of Republican,
sure. Yeah.
whatever. To me, just quick side note, my soapbox, I picture a world where there are no parties, right? Where it's just the best candidate wins. And even, maybe even moving away from just one person running the whole country. Because I think if anything, we've seen, no matter which side of the fence you stand on politically, it can get a little dangerous when there's one person has too much power.
Oh yeah.
But regardless, I think that it's tough when politicians have to, they're kind of forced to lie because their party says you need to be like this. And they don't always fit exactly into that box. And so then they're basically lying about certain things, and just the whole process is broken. But that's a whole nother.
That could be, Oof.
So anyway, so back to the story. So Hawaii, Honolulu, 7 years old, alcoholic mom, temper, physical abuse. So by the time I got to, we actually moved to DC when I was about 7. And to be closer to my mom's parents, the General and Mary Wooten. And my dad actually at that time went on a trip around the world. So he was gone for about 3 years. So didn't have that father figure in my life. My mom was still drinking at the time. And so things were a bit rocky to start, but I did settle in and was able to establish a bit of a friend network. And sports was a big thing that I kind of helped ingratiate me and I felt made me relate to other kids a bit more. I was very insecure. I had this like shoulder length hair, bowl haircut, overalls. I just did not fit into Bethesda, Maryland, which is where we ended up living, which was like a high-end like suburb. And it was very strange. My mom got an inheritance from her grandmother, which gave her the money to be able to buy there, and she wanted the best for us, so I give her credit. She wanted us to be in a nice area, but we were completely, I was like shaka bra. I had pidgin language that I still spoke from Hawaii, pidgin jargon, and I definitely didn't fit in. So it was a rocky start, but over the years, I kind of gained a little momentum and I was able to establish a friend group, and sports, like I said, really helped me. Then came the incident, and I talk about this in my book. Basically, one day in around 5th grade, so I was on a soccer team. Mm-hmm. And my dad actually came back and ended up being the coach for the soccer team. So that was really nice. And a brand new player from Cameroon, Africa came. He was on our team. He didn't speak very good English. And we all decided one day on the weekend, we were all going to go to the local pool. So we went to the pool. My mom was the chaperone. She took us all. And she was basically still like in the car, hadn't even gotten up to the pool yet. We rushed up. We went in. We all jumped right into the pool, and Roland was his name, jumped in right there with us and literally just sank like a rock. And we didn't even notice it first. We were like splashing around and we didn't realize. And thankfully, the lifeguard actually didn't even notice, but one of my friend's dads happened to also be there and watched us come in and saw him sink to the bottom. And he dove in, pulled him out, and gave him and resuscitated him basically, mouth to mouth, and basically saved his life. And as my mom's like strolling in, and because we were already kind of outsiders, and an incident not too long before this, I had a friend over at my house. My mom actually yelled at him. I told you my mom had a temper. That's not something you normally want to do, is yell at your son's friends. But she lost her temper, yelled at him. And so that was already like, the moms are kind of like, oh, watch out for that family. And so when this happened, it was like we were like blacklisted. And it was like my friends weren't allowed to play at my house. I wasn't allowed, it was very discouraged to go over there. My friend, and then the friends that I actually had, they kind of given me the stiff arm. So this was like a major demoralizer for me. It really just, I'd started to come out of my shell, and it just immediately put me right back in. And I was super insecure and just felt like the world was out to get me. And I was, at that time, there was a show called Alf in the 80s, which you're too young to remember, but it was about this little alien puppet. And I just remember watching that show. It was like the most popular show on TV, and thinking, yes, Alf, I get it. Because he was this outsider, and everybody's like, we don't understand you. You're so weird. Like, your friend, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. So we ended up, so that by the time I got to high school, I was definitely, your typical victim. High school was especially brutal. I was fighting with my mom every day. I ended up moving out of her house, moving in with my dad, who lived in Washington, D.C. So I actually transferred schools as well, because I was also being teased by kids, and I just didn't like the school I was in. Public school, so I went to private school, and word got out actually that I was kind of a loser at my other school as well, and that I had issues and whatever. I'm sure at that time I blew it up more than it might have been, but I immediately felt super insecure there as well, and that manifested itself into being picked on, and people just really made fun of me, and I didn't get any close friends. It's hard to, when you don't love yourself,
That's
and
tough,
when you're not confident and have that, and this is something I've learned over the years as I've been able to gain some of that, it's almost impossible to form good friendships and strong relationships and allies and whatnot. And so fortunately I did have a few good teachers that kind of took me under their wing, and I think they saw, that I was having a tough time, and I kind of threw myself into studies, and I ended up doing really well. Graduated, went on to college at Furman University, which for the I spent my first 2 years there actually, and struggled there as well though, socially. I just did not, I couldn't click. And I ended up transferring again, and I felt like I was, but at that time, that's actually when I had my serendipitous moment where I discovered a book. A teacher just happened to be lecturing. It was a Religions of the World course, and I'll never forget. He just happened to be talking. He's like, oh, and I read this book, and it completely changed my life. And I really respected this teacher at this time. And he was one of my favorite teachers, kind of taking me under his wing. And so I wrote it down, and the book was called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he's like, it was almost a side note that he said, but I kind of, he pivoted into it, and I ended up going straight to the library. I ended up reading the book. It was like, devoured it. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that type of stuff existed. Self-help was just not on my radar, and it kind of had a bad stigma. It's gotten much better since then, but it was like, now it's personal development, which is like, yeah, it's cool to become the best version of yourself. Why not? But back then it was like, self-help, what's wrong with you? You need help? Like, well, why? Are you broken? And I was like pretty much at rock bottom anyway. So I was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose. So I became this insatiable self-help beast, and I just started reading book after book, and I did start gaining momentum, but I felt like people had already labeled me in a certain way, and I couldn't break out of that. And I was like, I just want to transfer and have a fresh start. So I transferred to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, and I got that fresh start. And that was kind of the beginning of the rest of my journey, that I started really kind of gaining the momentum and learning about who I am, what's important to me, what makes me me, and being able to use that and become an owner of my life versus that victim, which was poor me. My life sucks. My brain's broken. There's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to kind of go through life hovering above rock bottom. So that was a great time at Rollins. Had great professors, joined the fraternity, ATO, made a great group of friends, was the pledge president. So that gave me a little bit of confidence and started kind of spreading my wings, so to speak. And then when I graduated, and just continued to keep reading self-help and really into that. And all the while I was taking notes along the way. I'm a crazy note taker. When I say crazy, I'm talking about like, I could fill 3 Bibles worth of my notes if they were actually no joke. And I just have always been that way. And it used to always be on paper. And then, the phones came out, and luckily I started putting them in the notes, which made it easier to translate and whatnot. But I just started taking notes on what worked, what didn't, failures, successes, basically these universal principles in life, right? So I'm reading all these books and I'm starting to notice patterns. And not only, I became my own human science experiment. Not only would I see it in what they were saying, but I would try it out in my own life. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, this works. And when I read it enough times and I tried it enough times in my own life, I realized, and I saw that, there was a pattern and it was going the same way over and over. I was like, okay, I call this a total truth. This is something that I can basically stake my reputation on and say, this is for real. And anybody that uses it, I can stand behind it. And so this is kind of what I started gathering, was these total truths. And I made it my mission to share these with as many people as possible, and people that were struggling the way I might have been one time. And, I literally changed my entire mindset. My perception, my confidence, my attitude was shifting. And it doesn't happen overnight, but when you start to see things differently, it's like a springboard effect and a ripple effect. And it just starts spreading to the other areas of your life. And before you know it, you do start becoming almost a different person. And to this day, now I've got two small little kids, Wyatt and Emmett, 4, he's about to turn 4, and Wyatt's about to turn 4, Emmett's 9 months. And, I see them and I just see that unbridled joy and happiness I had when I lived in Hawaii before things got crazy. And I'm just like, oh my God, I want you to hold on to that and never let it go. And so I catch myself sometimes because I don't want to but at the same time, I'm fortunate enough to have learned a lot of these things in life that I know for a fact will help them to lead their happiest and best lives. And I want to help other people do the exact same thing. And so, it's been a journey. I'll flash forward over the last 25 years, 20 years or so since graduating. I've started several businesses. I have a rental business that I rent houses to students. My most successful business was Doorstep Delivery, which I started with a partner. I was selling land, and I saw in around 2008, right when it crashed, I saw the writing on the wall, and I left my job selling land, and everybody thought I was crazy because we were making so much crazy money. And I was like, nope, trust me, it's coming to an end. Ditched that, and we were stuck in this office for literally like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week when I was selling that land. And even though the money was really good, the lifestyle sucked, and we couldn't order good food. All we had option-wise was pizza and Chinese. And at the time, and still, but I was, really working out heavily. I don't as much as I used to. I was really into like weights and lifting. One thing I skipped is I was a really skinny kid and tall and gangly. Okay. And so, whatever your natural body, I think, is, you always want to like change it and be something different, especially when you're insecure like I was when I was younger. So, I was into weights, I was trying to get big, and I couldn't do that off pizza and Chinese, right? And so I'm like, there's gotta be something better. And there wasn't. So literally I quit my job. Everybody thought I was crazy. And I asked my best friend, who's also working at the job, if he wanted to join me. And at first he said no, because he didn't think there was enough money in it. And then he slowly came around, and we started Doorstep Delivery, and your favorite restaurants delivered to your doorstep. And at the time, it was a novel concept. The Grubhubs, the Ubers, the DoorDashes, none of that stuff was around. This was way before that. There were a few others out there where you could call in and stuff, but we wanted to take it online. The online world was just now like becoming prevalent, and I was like, this is it. This is the timing. People are going to end up ordering online. And then literally like the next year, the iPhone came out, and I was like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Now they can order on their phones, right? So you know how that story played out. So we started building the business, and in building the business, I've always kind of had that entrepreneur mindset where I need to do it myself. I feel like I don't fit into the standard, like, structured culture. The way my brain works. And that's something I used to really try to push away and say, my brain's broken. Why does my brain work this? Now I wouldn't trade my brain for anything, because I'm super creative. Yeah. And yes, I'm ADD, but I've learned, so are a lot of people, but my ADD and my creativity, I think, helped me to have become the person that I am today, and to have taken the path that I have. And I also have this like super persistence in me, where like I will not quit or give up no matter what if I believe in something. And so I basically combined all that and took it and just ran with it and just wouldn't quit. And so our business hit obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. There's a lot of stories I could tell you. One that's kind of funny is this guy we tried to partner with and say, you know, at first we're like, okay, well, let's do this with bicycles. Cause there was these, they call them these pedicabs. So they, you know, they drive people around downtown and they have like the, you know, the seat in the back. And we're like, that's perfect. Like they don't have to worry about parking issues. They can just pick up the food at the restaurant, put the food in there, and deliver it all around downtown. And we were only going to start with downtown. And we like met with the head of the company, this pedicab business, told him our idea. Meanwhile, we were still getting things set up and figuring out the best way to launch. And he opened up. he opened up this, it was called, I'll never forget, it was called Meal Drop. And he opened up Meal Drop and we like saw it. We're like, what the heck? And we ordered it to my business partner's house, which was downtown. And he showed up and I'll never forget the look on his face. He was just like, I'm like, yeah, hey man, how you doing, buddy? He's like, oh, I was just waiting for you guys to open up. It's just like, and we're like, just get out of here, bro. Yeah. So luckily, you know, we believed enough in what we were doing to say, let him do his thing. We're just going to keep going. And sure enough, he went out of business about 6 months later. We started to really gain momentum, take off. We started in my buddy's spare bedroom at his house. We had 2 employees. We had a dispatcher and we had a driver. And then Andrew and I were everything else in between, and we filled in all the blocks. So we were driving a lot. We were dispatching a lot. At first, though, the orders were, 1-2 orders a day, and those were from our friends that we told to order to make sure that the system was working.
Yeah.
That evolved, and we were like networking like crazy. He and I were hitting downtown, every event we could go to, everybody we could tell. We did a mailer, which at the time, now I don't really believe in mailers, but at the time that was kind of the main way to get things out.
Yeah.
We did a mailer, it had our menu guide of all of our, so all of a sudden people are getting this menu guide with every like 20 restaurants that they could now order from. Sushi, you know, healthy, Italian, anything you wanted, really. And it was like this, everybody's like, whoa, what is this? And so it started building momentum and gaining ground. And then we got, about a year later, we got our first big client, which was EA Sports, and they ended up starting ordering. So at that time, we were basically up to about $500 a day, probably, in food orders. And they started ordering $1,000 orders a day. And that just changed everything for us. And we made them our number one priority and made sure that they were happy. And we were delivering them their food. And that helped us to expand. And then we moved into a bigger office and then a bigger office. Flash forward, we ended up opening 19 branches around the country, mainly in the Southeast. We ended up having thousands of drivers. I can't remember the final total. It was quite, it ended up expanding into quite the operation, and it was pretty neat how we were able to grow it. So some of our locations were franchises. We did franchise the business, and then, but most were corporate locations where it was us that basically, we would find an owner operator that lived in that city, like Jacksonville, for instance, and get them set up in their system and get it all going. So
The other thing to note though, I want to note real quick though, is that you didn't raise any capital, right? This is all your own money. You're reinvesting in the business. You guys were profitable. It wasn't a venture backed, we got, $100 million to go grow this thing like an Uber Eats or something like that, or Grubhub.
That's right. At the time, I'd read enough about how it works to take money from others. I'd read a lot of entrepreneur books and starting up, and we had enough money from selling land, which was, I was in a very successful, in a 2-year span, I was really successful, fortunately, in doing that. I actually was the number one salesperson. I won a new Range Rover. That's how much money this company was making. Like, as the salesperson who gave me a new Range Rover, it was insane. And so I had a bit of a stockpile, and I said, okay, look, and he did too, my partner, because he worked at the same company. So, okay, we've got a little bit of runway. Let's do this ourselves. Let's not take money from anybody else. And best decision we ever made. Well, put it this way, for us, it was, I don't recommend people not, to me, my advice is, if you're going to take money, you've got to make sure that that you're happy with the terms. And I won't go into all the details, but bottom line is, you want to make sure you have control of your company, and that nobody's essentially saying, okay, we now own you and you got to do what we say. But there are ways to structure deals where you can get money to help you grow. You just got to be careful about it. So anyway, grew that, and we ended up finally exiting. So excuse me, let me backtrack a little bit. Around
sorry.
2015, 16, the writing started to get on the wall. For about 5-6 years, we dominated. Nobody could touch us. We grew. We were all over Orlando. We were all over Florida. We were in Miami. We were in Jacksonville. We were in Tampa. We were in St. Petersburg. We were in Sarasota. And then we were in Nashville, Tennessee. We were in Denver. We started expanding around the country. And all of a sudden, we see Uber Eats open up. We see DoorDash open up. We see Grubhub open up. We see Postmates open up. And it was like all of them almost at once overnight were like in our backyard, right? And we were like, holy cow. And, you know, these companies have billions of dollars. So speaking of self-funded, they're the opposite. They're funded. And they are intentionally losing money to gain market share. That's what a lot of companies, you look at a company like Amazon. Amazon has done it successfully. A lot of people run out of money before they get to that point and they go out of business. Amazon is an example of somebody who basically just said, we're going to come in and squash everybody and we're going to lose money doing it, but we're going to provide such an awesome experience that we're going to gain these customers. And over the long run, we're going to basically put everybody else out of business. So that's kind of their, you know, for better or worse, whether you love them or hate them, that's how they've done it. And they've done it successfully. And, you know, we had these companies coming in. The way we made our money with Doorstep Delivery was mainly from the restaurants. We would get a commission on the deal, right? So if we sent them an order that they normally wouldn't have had, all of a sudden they're saying, oh yeah, you know, we've got our food costs, but our overhead and our labor, those are already fixed costs. Our people are here no matter what. We're already paying our rent and our utilities. They got to cook the food. So it's not really extra money out of their pocket other than the food cost, unless they're so busy that they can't handle the order, which not many restaurants were. So we would get a substantial discount basically on the order. We were essentially a marketing company. We're helping marketing them. And people were also going into the restaurant once they tried their food that they might not have after they ordered from us. So it was a win-win really with the restaurants. But then when these companies came in, they were literally just saying, okay, we'll do 0% commission for the next year. They were sending out, you know, $100 free coupons to customers to try them out. And it was only a matter of time before, you know, yes, we had very loyal customers, but when somebody's getting $100 in free food from a competitor, and then our restaurants, who were supposed to, by the way, be exclusive, we had exclusive deals signed with them where they couldn't sign with anybody else, but they all just said, look, you can drop us if you want. We're going to try these other guys out. And we realized we couldn't hold their feet to the fire. So we just said, fine, you know, and so we competed for a bit, but then they started gaining more and more market share. And I personally reached out. I just started looking at my contacts and I said, how can we exit? Like how can we or either exit or partner to be able to compete with these guys? So fortunately I'd met this guy named, it was a company called Bite Squad, and we had they had moved into our territory in Miami about a year earlier. And at first it was funny. There was actually a little bit of friction. And then we actually kind of started talking and becoming friends. And I started talking with this guy, and his name was Arash. And he was one of the owners of this company called Bite Squad out of Minneapolis. And they were doing the same thing we were. And I called him up and I said, look, man, I said, and we'd actually put ourselves officially on sale. And Grubhub made us an absolutely abysmal offer. And we're like, okay, we're not going to get the offer that we want. So we need to pivot and do something else and to expand and to try to compete with these guys. And so they did raise money, and we ended up partnering with them and basically doubled the size. They were about the same size as us. So we became about $100 million company at that time. And we partnered with them, and they essentially were just in the process of raising money, and their software was far superior to ours. We had developed our own software. We did our own app. That's a whole nother story. That was a very long journey. I don't recommend it unless you really are passionate about it. And here I am, I'm doing another one with my new business, which we'll talk about. But, and I learned, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned how you go through the process, but we didn't. And we ended up spending 5 times as long developing the app, spending 5 times as much on the app. And in the end, we didn't even get a product that we were super psyched with. And meanwhile, these guys, they had a software business before they started the food delivery business. That's why they started the food delivery business. And that actually was genius in retrospect, because if you can have good software that automatically dispatches the driver, we were still manually dispatching drivers. And there's only so much you can grow, right? There's limitations on that. When you're manually have people saying, okay, go here or do this or sending, so we literally, these guys had software that automatically sent the drivers to the food order to the best driver, just like Uber Eats and these other companies did.
Yeah.
So we ended up switching immediately to their software. They raised money. They were able to expand. We started going into all the tier 2 and tier 3 cities we could, right? Because the Grubhubs and the Ubers and all them, they were all in these tier 1 markets, the LAs, the New Yorks, Chicagos. And they did just start moving into like the Orlandos, which is it's a tier 2 city. But not, they weren't coming in as aggressively. So these tier 2 and tier 3, mainly even tier 3 cities are what we focused on. And we just started literally calling everybody in the entire US that was an RDS that was open, that was in a market that wasn't super huge yet. And we knew that the first one in had a huge advantage. So if we could establish ourselves there before one of these other big players got to there, we knew that was going to be, help us out a lot. So that's basically what we did. And then we grew that. We were able to purchase more than several, probably about 20 different companies, and doing it through a stock deal. And then we ultimately, so we grew to a certain point, and then we ended up selling to this company called Waiter Holdings out of Louisiana, which is owned by Tillman Fertitta, who is a restaurateur, a very successful entrepreneur, and he had this fund and he wanted to do something with it, and he decided to do this. So they purchased us for $330 million. Back in, the deal finalized in February of 2019, I believe.
Okay.
And they actually went public on the New York Stock Exchange. So they went public. So for a minute, I was on cloud 9. I was like, woohoo! Life has, because a lot of our deal was in stock. Unfortunately, the stock of Waiter Holdings since then has been abysmal, and it went from about $15. It's now at about 40 cents. So that's been, but you know what, I'll tell you, as painful as that was to watch and see, like, I spent 10 years building this business, growing it. I finally exited, exactly what I wanted to do in my goal. And then watching what I thought was here, go down to here was very painful. But I will say it kept me moving. It kept me hungry. It made me realize, like, look, I've got to keep going, and I got to feed my family. And if I've got these goals that I want financially and I want to meet them, then I got to keep going. And so if anything, I'm grateful for the fact that I'm super motivated every day because of it. And I know that sounds, a lot of people say, oh yeah, right. And yes, there was some pain involved, but the thing with pain is we're all going to experience it. And if you just try to say, I'm going to welcome this and I'm not going to try to fight it, I'm just going to let it in, but this is temporary. It's going to pass. And without the bitter, the sweet just ain't as sweet. And by this happening, when the next sweet one, the great thing does happen, it's going to feel that much more awesome, and it's going to keep me moving and motivated. So that's kind of the story of how that played out. And then around that time in February, I'd already kind of slowly on the side been working on this book I've been putting together for the last 20 years or so. As I mentioned, I was this crazy note taker in college, so doing these notes work. And in becoming an entrepreneur in business and becoming successful, I realized, that's just one small part of it. And so I know we're going to talk about this shortly, but the short of it is, once I did sell that business, even though that feeling was amazing for a moment, even before it really started to crash, I was like, this isn't what life's all about. Like, I've spent my last, 15 years thinking that this is it. And, fortunately, in reading self-help books, I was realizing there's other areas that are important, and I was developing those as well. But I really thought it was going to be a much more like, hallelujah, I'm going to go sit on a beach and drink a pina colada and never have to worry about anything again. And that's definitely not how it works. And anybody that's ever made a ton of money or, had been in a position where they've experienced that euphoria will tell you it's a great feeling. And yes, money is important, especially when you don't have any, but there is kind of a sweet spot in there to where once you go beyond a certain point, as long as you have what you need and what you want and you're fulfilling your needs, it doesn't really incrementally add the happiness you think. And in fact, it can cause a lot more problems. So for instance, having all that money and then seeing the stock drop, that was extremely stressful and all this. Whereas if I just there was a cash portion of the deal, which is a great cash portion. If I'd just gotten that and there was no stock and I never knew that I had all this
Yeah.
money that wasn't really real and that I lost it, I would have been a lot better off. It would have been
Yeah.
a lot less stressful. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that. It was a really interesting experience. And at the end of the day, I learned, there's these 5 main core areas of your life. And this is what I've developed. And they kind of all came to fruition when I sold my company. And I realized, holy cow, it's not just about the career and financial, which is one of your cores.
Yeah.
There's 4 others. And so if you're not continually building, stopping what I call your failure habits in each and replacing them with success habits, building positive momentum, nurturing them, taking action on each of those, and moving towards a balanced life with these 5 cores, you're not going to be happy. And you may be happy for a minute, and you might spend all your time in your career and finances, and it might feel euphoric. Like I said, when you get a win or when you get that next deal, and it is important, and that's good to have goals and to be that as one of your cores. But if you ignore your other 4, you're screwed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And thank you for sharing that whole journey and getting vulnerable in the beginning and opening up about, childhood and family and all that stuff. Cause I think it really painted a picture of why you're so motivated and have been able to get to where you have, and building Doorstep through all of the turmoil, seeing the 2008 crisis and getting out of land before the bottom fell out. And now really bringing what you've been learning over the course of all these years to not focus just on the career, financial, entrepreneurial type success, but the whole package. So yeah, tell us a little bit about more momentum and what are the 5 cores. So we've got the financial piece, right? We've talked about career, financial. What is more momentum in these 5 cores that you've referenced?
So, right. So as I was just kind of mentioning, I started on the side basically being like, as I was still working for the company that purchased us, Bite Squad, I said to myself, okay, I've been working on this book for all these years. So it didn't actually start as a book. I was just taking all those notes in college. And then they started to evolve and then just became so big. And then I'm like, you know what? This could help other people. Like, I'm learning all these total truths, as I call them. And I'm learning a lot of things that I know will help others. And what I was frustrated with was that there wasn't just one place I could go to feel like, okay, I can kind of from A to Z get the basics of what it's all about and then just springboard off of that. I felt like, almost every single self-help book you read is about one particular topic, like dealing with stress or, your physical health or relationships. And I'm like, no, it's the big picture, and I want to combine them all. And so it's been the challenge of my life. It's been like putting a jigsaw puzzle with as many pieces as there are grains of sand at the beach. But I feel like I've finally gotten to the point where it all came together. And yes, there's essentially, we all share the same 5 core areas. And these are, your mindset is your first one. This is kind of the biggest one in terms of you can't really kill it in your other areas if you don't have your mindset going for you. And that is your perception. It's your attitude. It's your overall confidence on life. It's how do you see yourself? Is the glass half empty? Is it half full? Is it a woe is me, I'm a victim, life sucks, just like I used to be in college, there's nothing I can really do about it? Or obstacles are temporary roadblocks that I know that I'm going to get past, kick ass, take names, and there's nothing that can get in my way. And once you start to shift your mind to that, and you really believe in yourself and what you can do, and that the world is there to help you, and that there's, depending on how you see it, you can use it to your advantage versus having it be something that's hurting you and taking away from your experience. That's huge, man. And that doesn't happen overnight. And I have, my book and the app that I'm also developing, which I'll talk about that shortly, sort of helps people for each of these cores, and starting with your mindset, to say, okay, what is the mindset I currently have? Let's shine a spotlight on it. And why do I have this mindset? And you kind of look at, these are the different ways that I'm thinking. These are the different habits that I've developed in regards to that mindset. And I help you sort of identify the most common ones and get you kind of started. And then what do I want to replace those with in order to then become this person I want to be for mindset? So for instance, fear is something that we all deal with, right? We all have insecurities at times. We all, different levels of fear for different things. But if you change the way I used to let fear completely paralyze me, right? And so this whole thing, everything I'm doing is about movement, momentum, continuing to gain that momentum and become the best version of yourself. versus the opposite is just freezing into a little ball and not moving and just hovering above rock bottom. And, you know, fear is one of those things that most people let cripple them, just like I used to. I used to have major social phobia. I couldn't talk to people. If it was more than like 2 or 3 people, I would just freeze up. The thought of doing a speech or anything like that was absolutely terrifying to me. Excuse me. And so, you know, I developed this relationship with fear where I gave it the finger. I'm like, you know what, fear? I'm going to use you as something that's signaling an opportunity for growth. Because if I'm afraid of something, that means it's a growth opportunity. And I'm going to tackle it head on. And you just get in the habit of doing that. And when you get in the habit, like one cool thing about habits is they don't care if they're good or bad, help or hurt you. Once they're established and they're locked in, they're going to keep doing their thing, right? And you have a bad habit, a failure habit, as I call them, you know, a lot of people don't even realize it's hurting, right? So fear is something a lot of people deal with, but they just kind of push it off to the side, like, oh, I'm scared of that. And then they just go to the next thing, right? They don't tackle it. And that's a bad habit. But then once you get in the habit of, oh, I'm recognizing, you become aware, this is a fear. Why am I afraid of this? What benefits could I get by tackling this head on? Mm-hmm. And where could I be if I was able to basically overcome this? And that's a cool place to be, because then you're like, okay, how can I get there? And you just start taking, and the key is just start taking action on it and just start doing it. Just like flying. If you're flying, the only way to solve it is just fly more, you know, and you'll get over it. And just like anything, the more you do it, the more confidence you build. And you're like, okay, this isn't so scary. It's not that scary monster that your brain is tricking you into thinking it is. So that's the overall sort of mindset core. Do you have any questions on that before I move on?
No, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you can get the mindset right, that leads to all the other habits, right? If you're not in the right frame of mind to go develop these other cores, how can you develop them? So that makes a ton of sense. You got to start with your head and getting it right.
Right. So. That's it. So that everything kind of trickles down from there. And then your career and finances, we kind of discussed, that's the second one, but it's not how most people see it, right? Most people look at success as being financially successful, having a good career. That's just 1/2 of 1/5 of the equation, right? So if you look at, you have 5 cores and your career and your finances is one of those cores. The financial part of it is just literally 1/2 of 1/5. And yet most of us put everything into that. And so the thing, you know, so the career side of it is, what are you, you know, what are you really, really good at? Identifying your strengths. What do you really love? Like what gets you excited? What, you know, what revs your engines, so to speak? What are you super passionate about? And then what are you not so good at? You know, what are the things that, you know, you don't have an affinity for, you know that you're not great at. And this is an area where I used to try to suppress those things or try to do those things that I wasn't good at and be like, no, I can do it just like everybody else. Bottom line is everybody's different and everybody's going to have different strengths and weaknesses. Don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. You know, focus on the stuff you're awesome at, and that's the and are passionate about, and that's how you're going to excel, right? And then make sure that the stuff that you're not, these days it's easier than ever. You can outsource so easily on the internet. I use Upwork. I have like several different people helping me with areas of my weaknesses that are helping me doing. I have an assistant that we like click like this. It's like she's my yin to my yang. When I don't know something, it's her and she knows. So there's no need to kind of to feel like, well, I'm just going to ignore those and try to fight through them. And then, you know, it's developing a purpose based on that stuff and saying, okay, what do I really want to, like, where do I want to be? Like on my funeral, what do I want said about me? And where do I want to end up? And once you've done that, it's not like that's your end all be all. And it's, you start setting goals based on that stuff and figure out a way to get there. And you're going to pivot. There's going to be changes. There's going to be failures. You're going to be like, oh, I really thought it was going to work out if I went this way, but now I'm going this way. Perfect example of me meeting somebody like you. Like I didn't even know I was going to be going to Rollins. Now I met you. We're talking about helping each other out with our apps, and that could end up turning into something. Like you just never know how things are going to pivot, and you just got to be open and say, okay, this is an opportunity. But having clear goals and knowing where you're going, that just really helps solidify getting rid of all those millions of things that are coming at you from every direction every day, especially now in today's tech generation and the generation. You've got a zillion things coming at you, and to know how to sift through that, all the BS, and keep going on the path that you know is going to take you to the promised land. That's mega.
Makes sense. How
And
do I
then,
know what my strengths are? Like if I'm thinking about this, and I feel like a lot of people struggle to figure out, analyze themselves, right? And sometimes it's easy to pick out all the things that you do wrong, right? Oh, I'm really bad at this. I'm really bad at that. Some people are really good at figuring out what they're good at, but any advice for figuring out what are your strengths? What are the things that I should be focusing on?
yes. So in my book and in the app, it helps you with that. And basically, you ask yourself questions like, what have people always told me I'm good at? What do I know that I've just always kind of had an affinity for, that I just know that I'm good at? There's several other types of those questions where, what's crazy is, most people in general know like, yeah, I'm good at this. But when you actually sit down and you put it on paper, and that's the key, you got to write it down. And then you really start looking at it, and then you start adding to your list, or there might be things you thought you were good at, but maybe you're not as good at, and that becomes like for me, that list didn't happen overnight. It developed, and I have it in my momentum book that I read very, very regularly. That's going to be basically turned into the app, and that's part of the reason I did the app. I'm tired of reading this momentum book. All these different things that basically help me to build momentum on a regular basis, and my strengths is one of them, right? So I open it up, I look at them, and if I start to get off track again, it's helping to make sure you're not getting pulled in every direction, but saying, okay, this is what I'm good at. I need to remember I need to make sure that I'm focusing on these things in my career and in my life, and not getting sidetracked and doing other stuff. So that would be how I'd recommend it. Same with your passions, same with your weaknesses. I would recommend writing all of them down. So then the financial side of it is now, so you're starting to, whatever money you're making doing this thing you're passionate and awesome at, you want to keep, and you want it to compound over time. And so a big theme of everything I'm doing is the law of compounding. I love it. It basically states that, things don't happen immediately. It's not like this instant generation. Everybody thinks you snap your fingers and, hey, I'm an Instagram millionaire and I'm got a bazillion followers. I mean, yes, that stuff happens, but that's not true success. That's not long-term success. And that stuff is fleeting. Real success is taking one baby step at a time and continuing to take those success actions that turn into success habits that manifest and grow and accumulate over time until you become this unstoppable force. So that's kind of really the key on how to do that. Now I've actually lost my train. What was I talking about right before that?
You were talking about this was the financial core. We were doing strengths and weaknesses, and then moved into
so financial, right? So you want to use that law of compounding for you in the financial sector as well. You want to make sure that your money is building upon itself passively, whether you're working for it or not, right? Things like real estate, the stock market, bonds. You want to actually my blog that I write, moremomentum.com. Sign up. If you go, blog I literally just got out this week is about using that making sure that you're developing success habits in these passive type income things. So right now it's easier than ever. You've got things like these apps like Robinhood, Mint, we were talking about the other day, where you can just literally, set it and forget it. And I know you're working on something which is super exciting, and I'm like 1000% for it, because that fits exactly into what I'm talking about, which is essentially helping you connect with why you do these things, understanding them, and giving you the right habits to start doing, so that you're setting yourself up for success and you don't even have to think about a lot of this stuff. It just kind of sets itself up. So I love that. And that is super key. A lot of people don't ever even get that, and they just work every dollar they make, they work for it. And, you're never going to get exponentially wealthy if you don't use that stuff.
Absolutely.
So, the next core is the relationships. So this is, I break this down into three main areas. So you've got your colleagues, acquaintances, strangers, right? So these are people like you and I were at Rollins. We're becoming more friends now. We're colleagues, So here's a perfect example. You were proactive in coming to talk to me, and then we started a relationship, and now we're talking, and this could springboard into something. Who knows? It could become a friendship. It already is becoming a friendship. It could become a really neat alliance where we help each other in each other's careers. And that's what it's about. You just never know who, what person you meet is going to become a good relationship, long lasting, or a great alliance. And so most of us, we walk through the day and we're looking at our phones, and people are talking to us, we're thinking about something else, we're not giving them our full attention. We're distracted and not looking them in the eyes. These things, man, it didn't used to be a problem as much, back in the day when it was like all this, we didn't have all these electronics and all this stuff. And now it's really become a byproduct of what's happened in our society. And if you're not careful, it's really going to bite you, because you start developing, again, these bad habits, these failure habits of doing that stuff. And before you know it, you're just kind of isolating yourself, and people start looking at you as like aloof or non-approachable. And then it's like, no, I just assume that person's this way. And that's just how people are. So then your next one is your friends and your family. So, super important, again, with technology, it's become easy to just like somebody's picture on Facebook or send them a text message. You've got to have that real human connection, that interaction. It's literally in our biology. Evolutionarily, back in the day, we had to have that human connection to survive, to make sure, when we were in herds, it helped us fend off the animals and whatnot. And we worked together to make sure everybody's fed and taken care of and health and whatnot. And so that's in our DNA. And now we're to the point where you can pretty much live a secluded life on your phone, your computer, your tablet, all these things, and not have much communication with people. You can order food. One of those at your house. You don't even have to go out and buy it, talk to anybody. So, super important to reach out, make sure that you are proactively engaging with these people on a regular basis, as much FaceTime as possible. As you get older, trust me, when you're younger, it's a lot easier to have that. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I got plenty of friends. As you get older, you get your career, you get a family, you get kids, it becomes way harder. So you want to develop those habits now before it becomes too late. And then you're like this recluse and you're like, something's missing. What is it? And it's like, oh, I'm not spending time with friends. And then when you do spend time with them and family, there's no better feeling, right?
Yeah.
And then the final one, the third one is your significant other. So, if you do have one, if you don't, the point is, you want to make sure that if you're in a relationship, you're working together and you're on the same team. So many relationships, it becomes a battle of the egos, right? And everybody's born a different way. Everybody has their own thoughts, feelings, all these things. And when you get into a relationship with somebody, it's just in our nature. We assume that they think the way we do. And that's trouble with a capital T, because then we start making assumptions and we start, then we start looking at them differently and we start getting frustrated with them. And, that honeymoon phase, all that stuff is blurred because you're just in love and you're infatuated with each other. So you don't see any of that. But once all that stuff wears off, then reality hits. And if you're not actively, working, trying to come together as a team and working together and saying, look, it's you and me, let's figure out a way to make this work and be awesome together, then you're going to have problems. So my wife and I, for instance, we have these agreements. And again, this is something I put in my book and the app. And it's like, okay, what are the things that we know? We identified problems that we were having circularly, and everybody has them, right? And we're like, okay, how do we stop these? You're seeing it this way. I'm seeing it this way. How can we meet in the middle so that we don't have the same fight, the same problem, the same strain on our marriage moving forward? And it's been phenomenal, right? And it just helps us become aware and shine a spotlight on these things that are hurting our marriage and our relationship. And they start to disappear. It doesn't happen overnight, because again, we've developed these failure habits where we look at things a certain way and you'll immediately but then you'll catch yourself and you go, oh, no, we talked about this. She's seeing it this way. I'm seeing it this way. Let's calm down. Let's meet in the middle and let's, do what we agreed on. So that's just kind of an overview of the relationship sector. Do you have any questions or feedback on that?
No, I mean, it makes sense. And I like that you hit the separated that out with acquaintances, colleagues, friends, and then specifically the significant other. Cause I think that's huge in having the team component versus, friction, or not friction, but the butting heads in a relationship. And I think that's something that we don't talk about. And that goes, beyond the scope of this conversation, but, getting into the details of, are you aligned and where are your differences and recognizing those and then coming together as a team. versus just the, hey, we're in love and it'll all work out.
It'll all work out. Right. Exactly. And if you don't go into it knowing it's going to take some work. And one of the things I kind of forgot to mention is discipline is a big part of all of this. Like mindset, like you've got to basically say, I'm going to make a commitment and I'm going to stick to it no matter what. And that's part of developing a mindset, which also spreads to all of your other cores. And you need to basically be willing to unhinge those failure habits that are locked in deep. And it's not going to be fun at first because they've dug themselves in and they really don't want to let go.
Yeah.
But as you start to do the work, you say, I'm going to commit to doing this and I'm not going to stop no matter what the habit is, no matter what the core. And that's what the app is going to help them do. The book's going to help them identify them, and the app is going to help make sure that they actually are doing them each day. And that is the key, is just making sure that you're doing them, and it's building that positive momentum. So yeah. So then moving into the final core is your emotional health and your giving back. Excuse me, we skipped physical health.
Yeah.
Physical health is, so this one's fairly obvious. The key with this one, so it's looking good, feeling good, building the energy and stamina to propel you through life. Again, when you're young, it's very easy to be like, oh, I can eat whatever I want and I don't have to work out and I still look great. And that's fine, but if you don't start developing that as you get older, take it from me, because I've always been super thin. Like I said, I was grotesquely skinny college. And then as I hit like 35, I'm like, whoa, what is happening here? And then I had it earlier but then I kept working out and everything was fine. Then I had an ACL injury actually earlier this year, and I wasn't able to really do anything. I tore my ACL playing basketball for about 9 months, and I gained like 15 pounds. And I was like, whoa, like that's the first time I gained that much weight in such a short amount of time. Yeah. And I realized, I was like, wow, my habits were saving me and I didn't even realize it. Like I can become big and fat, and my energy was way down, and I just felt terrible all the time because the mind body has a major connection. And when I wasn't doing those things. So the key is, while yes, it's important everybody finds a way to exercise and eat right. Everybody's different. You're going to like different things that you eat, right? But if you can find things that, you want to stay away from the sugars. To me, fat is way better than sugar, but that's arguable, so I won't go too much into that. But, there's certain things that, are pretty basic and obvious, like the white demons, sugar, flour, salt. You just everything in moderation. So it's not like I have this strict, crazy diet, and a lot of people do that, and that's great, and they like it, and they develop those habits, and it doesn't feel like they're sacrificing anything. For me, I still like my fun stuff, but it's in moderation, and I have foods that I eat that are good for me, but to me, they taste awesome, right? Yeah. And so it's going to be trial and error, experimenting. And everybody's got their habits of the foods that they're used to, that they love, that they've eaten all. But if these are like filled with chemicals, preservatives, and fat and sugar, and salt, it's like, okay, well, what can I pivot to that's going to be similar, going to give me that similar high, that dopamine fix when I eat, but not killing my health. And so again, at first you're going to be like, oh, this is good. But then once you start it and you actually commit to it and you do it, the other thing, you're going to be like, oh, that's gross. I can't believe I ate that. Trust me, that's what happens. And like sugar becomes like so sweet. It's like, if you're not eating sugar regularly, it's like this super luxury, and it's almost like too sweet. Yeah. When you eat fruit for a dessert, for example, versus, chocolate cake. And then physical wise, you want to find your routine that works for you. For me, it's basketball. I'd love to do it. I don't feel like I'm exercising. Then I lift weights afterwards, and I call it habit stacking. It's one of the tools and tricks that I use to help with all this stuff that I get into in my book and the app. And it's basically using different habits on top of each other that makes them incrementally easier and reduces the friction. So one of the things, when I go to work out, I actually listen to podcasts. Sometimes I'll listen to music, depending on the day, but normally it's podcasts and it's motivational stuff. I listen to books on tape, and I'm literally just like so into this stuff that I'm not even really thinking about the difficulty that it's taking to lift. And it's not like an hour workout isn't boring like it used to be. Like if you're just sitting there just like, because you're listening and you're learning. And I literally just like in between sets, I'll go in and still doing my notes. I'll be listening to something, I'll pause it, and then I'll put in notes. Like, yeah, that's a good one. Tying it all back into everything I'm doing. So, for me, that's it. But everybody's different. My wife, she loves to run. She was a runner in college. She that's her thing, where it makes her feel free and awesome, and she gets her exercise. And so we got her a thing downstairs. She wants to get the Peloton bike thing. She goes to Orange Theory. Anytime you can involve competition, by the way, in your working out, there's science has proven that does tend to push you a little bit harder and further than if it's just you versus yourself. So, find what it is you love and develop that routine. Put it into your schedule. So for me, I literally have 3 days of the gym minimal that I go, where I play basketball, where they have basketball days, and then I lift afterwards. And then a lot of times I'll add other stuff to it, like we'll go for huge hikes or walks, or do family or do stuff. And the idea is you want to try to move every day. And on the days I don't work out, I try to at least do push-ups, which I actually put my kid on my back, and it's fun and playing, and the whole thing becomes fun. Again, it's making it fun. You want to reduce friction on all these things by making it less painful and making it fun and something that you want to do versus something you have to do. That's the key. And then final one is your emotional health and giving back. So this is essentially enjoying the ride, limiting your stress, making sure that what your passions are and you're incorporating them on a regular basis. You're stopping to smell the roses, so to speak, versus just going through life with your head down, and then before you know, it's like, oh, a year went by. What? I didn't do anything that I like or enjoy or have fun. And I've just been, you gotta incorporate that stuff. And stress is something we all deal with. Dwelling. I'm reading a book right now, The Power of Now. And he's a genius. And he talks about staying in the moment, and the past and the future. The past was a present moment that's not there anymore, and the future is a present moment that hasn't passed. And you just want to focus on what's happening in the moment and not get caught up in dwelling on the past and things that happen and worrying about the future, right? I mean, yes, you want to set goals and you want to plan for the future, but you don't want to be like, oh my God, how's this going to happen? And so many people spend their lives doing that, and it's just tragic because you spend so much time and energy doing that, and you're not when you could be focusing on these other things that are going to propel you through life. And then the last part of that is the giving back, which is essentially, making sure that the world is a better place for having you in it than worse. I mean, it's pretty simple. Are you giving back? Are you lying, cheating, stealing, taking, and doing everything you can to try to get away with it so that you can get to the top? Or are you looking at the big picture and being like, you know what, when I give back, when I help others, it actually makes me feel way better than this other way that I've been doing it. And it's so funny because, when you're younger, especially, and we're all selfish creatures, it's just in our nature again. And this is all stuff that's like, once you get it, and you're like, it makes sense. And then you figure out ways to change it. But a lot of people never get that. And they do just lie, cheat, steal their whole lives. And they never get that, how great it feels to give back and to do good for others, and how much better of a feeling and more fulfilling, and how that fills your soul than the opposite.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of talking, but that's the basic overall gist. So.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, it hits on all the major facets, and obviously you've been in the, consumed a lot of personal development, self-help, and have been able to distill down through this note-taking that you've done and life experiences. So I like that you're putting it all in one place, and I'm excited for the app and book, and be able to combine the two to really focus on these 5 different cores. And I think you're really focusing on, it sounds like, the giving back piece through this
right. Yeah, this is my
this
giving
whole process.
Right. I've chosen a career that combines the giving back. So my whole mission and my purpose in life right now is help others become the best version of themselves, so they can in turn pay it forward to help the world become the best version of itself.
Yeah.
It's gotten a little crazy. Like I said, no matter what you believe in politically and whatnot, I think we can all agree things are a little nutty right now. And if everybody lived their life by these 5 cores, I guarantee you we would have so many less problems in the world, right? War, all that stuff would go away. It doesn't fit into your cores. It doesn't make sense. Teenage suicide. It's at an all-time high right now, especially for girls. That would go away because you're not going to feel happy about yourself. You're not going to compare yourself to others. You're going to remember what it's about. So 5 core life. That's what it's about.
I like that. I'm curious, how much has your kids and family impacted this specific project? Because you mentioned earlier the joy and just don't want them to lose that, Wyatt and Emmett. And I'm curious because it kind of aligns. Obviously, you've been researching this stuff, but it aligns with them growing up and wanting to give back. It sounds like also so that they don't go through some of the same struggles that you went through as a kid.
For sure. When I had my first son, so he's about to turn 4 in April. When I had Wyatt, like I said, that was right around actually when we were in the process of merging with Bite Squad. And so I realized that I was kind of on the precipice of exiting. We hadn't officially exited yet, but I knew I was getting out of what I was doing. And it just felt like such a relief because the end of the business had gotten to a point where I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. And there wasn't so much of a giving back component, although in Orlando, when I lived there, we did do a thing where we did partner with restaurants that donated we actually would pick up their food that they didn't use that was still, we had to have certain qualifications and make sure it was sanitary and whatnot. So only certain foods apply. But we would have our drivers literally pick that up at the end of the night so that it wasn't just thrown in the dumpster, and we would deliver it to homeless shelters. So, and we did a couple other projects actually. So that was good. But overall, I knew I had this in me where I was like, and then my kid's born and I'm like, oh, God, like I do not want him to go through the same stuff I went through. I want him to learn these lessons. And then it just got me thinking like, look, I've been working on this thing for so long. Like now's the time to finish. Cause I was deciding like, what am I going to pivot into? Like, what's my career going to be when I sold my business? And, I made the hard decision that even though I knew I'd be pumping a lot of money into this for a couple years and not getting really anything, no money back. Right now I have zero source of income other than my rentals and my passive income. And now my wife is working for the Chicago public school system. She just got her physical therapy degree. She's got her doctorate from Northwestern. So that's exciting. So that is some extra money coming in. But basically, I made my decision that this is what I want to do. And no matter what it takes, no matter how much it costs, this momentum movement, helping people to do this. And my son, it started with him and then I have my next son and it's like, I want them to be able to have the opportunity to live their best lives. And not only, just through these principles and stuff that I'm going to be instilling in them, but the more I can instill them in others, the better off their world's going to be if they interact.
Yeah.
Like, the thing actually catches on and people start living the 5 core life. And, that's what's going to happen. Just like I talked about relationships, this is what's going to start happening with the world versus this is what's happening right now. Right?
Yeah.
There's literally, we're split in two. It's like polar, and it's not just the US, it's everywhere. So that was really a motivating factor. And I said, yep, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it for them. And I want them to have and even like, whether you believe in climate change or not, I think we can all agree. Let's just, for the sake of, argument, say, even if there's a potential that we could burn ourselves up in the next 100 years or so, like we need to start taking some action and start changing some things. And, I want my kid to be comfortable, and I want his kids and his kids' kids. Like I want this to be a legacy that goes on, and I want, future generations. And right now we've done a job to our planet, in my opinion. Actions and things have to be taken. And so that's kind of all part of this kind of, on the side of me saying, okay, how can we also help, to spur more awareness in that sector?
Cool. Well, I love it. And I want to be cognizant of time. So I think, we could definitely keep going, but I think we'll have to postpone and set up some more time to dive deeper. But I'd
love to talk more. And we didn't really get too much of a chance to talk about your app and how that relates, but just quickly, I know you're developing this awesome app, and I want to help push that on my app, on what I'm doing, because the career and the financial, like I said, it's so important. And anything you can do to reduce friction and help those healthy habits, the success habits, to take off, I'm all about. And your software that you're developing sounds phenomenal. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it aligns perfectly within that, the finance core and focusing on the habits. Cause I mean, as you know, the mindset is a big piece, and we aren't wired to make rational decisions and calculate every possible, the best utility or whatever. And we make decisions based on things that have been pre-wired into us from our parents and society and all that stuff. And oftentimes it's not in our best interest as we're getting bombarded on our phones and seeing all these messages from marketing when you're scrolling through Facebook and the lives that you wish you were living. And it's the decision making and the habit. So I think it's perfectly aligned. So I'm really excited about what you're building, and I think it aligns with what we're doing at Ostrich. So
Thanks, man. Well, I'm super glad I met you. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It was an honor, and I appreciate your time. And I look forward to our relationship building and continuing on.
Absolutely. I'm super excited. And yeah, thanks for taking the time, Will.
Yeah, sounds great, buddy. Thank you.
All right. So that's it. That concludes my conversation with William Moore, the founder and CEO of Doorstep Delivery, now building more momentum. As you can tell, he's got a lot of insightful things, and Will opened up a lot about his experience. And what I really love is the persistence, the drive, the continue to take action. You can hear him talk about getting out of that scarcity and feared mindset and how he's been able to translate that in his life. So a lot of really valuable advice, and I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe if you have not. Please share the podcast with others that you think would get value from it. This conversation goes really deep, and I don't know anyone that wouldn't be able to take something away from this. So please share this with others that you think would get value. Make sure to connect with Will and become a part of the movement and help make the world a better place through being the best you and living your best life. Thank you so much for being a listener and watcher of the Silicon Alley podcast. That's it for today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, getostrich.com, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys.